ऑनलाईन आहे का? अरे वा वा वा. मग आता आपण दोघे जण घ्यायचे काय? तू तिघे जण आहे. एकदम चर्चा सत्र सेलिब्रेशन चर्चा नाही का? Come ahead. Occupy the front seats.
Occupy the front seats, please.
Be leaders now. Those who want to be leaders, they should occupy the front seats.
कोई नहीं करेगा.
आइए आइए. आओ सामने आओ. ये नितिन ये समोर ये नितिन.
Dr. Deoda sir, can you hear us?
हाँ बाबू सही करते हैं. Hi. हाँ.
Dr. Deoda?
Yeah. I'm here.
Yes. So, technically have come and we will start in 2 minutes. Negi, Professor Negi? Praksana Negi?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, madam. So, we are here now and we will just start in 2 minutes. So, let me welcome our director. Will introduce he will formally welcome you all. But let me tell you the genesis of this program. 1972 was the year when this Stockholm Convention took place on environment. Stockholm Convention on human environment. And since then, environment got attention worldwide. So that time, 3 major issues were there. First, environmental assessment, and other was environmental management, and third was international cooperation and support. How to extend this support for environmental management and assessment? So since then, this environmental issue got attention, and our NEERI, this NEERI came into existence in 1974. I think that was the genesis, that was the outcome of this Stockholm Convention. And since then, you see the journey of this Stockholm Convention after 10 years. There was the Nairobi Convention in 1982, just after 10 years. It was held in Nairobi to review what is the outcome of this, because there were 26 principles on which countries participating in the Stockholm Convention, they agreed to make action plan and to implement this action plan. But unfortunately, what happened 10 years after in Nairobi Convention, this was partially achieved. So developing countries, there was still gap between developing countries and developed nations. So what to do? Then again in the series, 1992 there was this Earth Summit, which called as Rio Convention, Rio Declaration. In that also same thing again came into picture that our environmental assessment and management activities still were lagging behind, and we are suffering due to some industrialized actions of developed countries. If you see all these developments, so then India, that EIA notification came into existence in 1994, and since then again NEERI was a lead institute which was doing EIA activities. So now question here is that if we are these international commitments, environmental commitments and standards, we are developing all these conventions, everything going on. I think if you name any environmental component, biodiversity, ozone depletion, or anything, means so you will get everywhere these conventions. Like Montreal Declaration is there, Vienna Convention is there, Ramsar Convention is there, then this Kyoto Protocol is there. So everything, now we are talking about climate change, now COP26 is now we have something to achieve net zero emissions by 2070. So are these achievable, and how NEERI is going to play a role in this? So we have some panelists here, I will not go in detail. But the journey of this international convention and treaties to India is a party and other countries are also party. But I think you see that some conventions have failed. Because if you go in the past, so whatever we declared, we could not achieve. So what was the reason? And if you see in the context of NEERI, so if I see annual reports of NEERI on the past, so we see only this Stockholm Convention in big picture. Because we are already Stockholm Convention Regional Center for ASEAN. But other conventions, still we have worked little or more, but we cannot say that we have covered this convention. Because you see, biodiversity we are working. But if this related to this convention of related to biodiversity, we cannot say that we have this, because we are not focusing on projecting. So this is the time since World Environment Day, this is celebrated because we have World Environment Day, 50 years it is being celebrated from 1972 with the genesis of environmental this nation's environment program. So this is the time we have to rethink, re-strategize and revisit our R&D activities also. How to link this international, how to link those activities with international context, in international context, and with international conventions and treaties. So we have a distinguished panelist here. Dr. Devta is our lead panelist, and he will be talking on some science and technology aspects. Dr. Vote is former director NEERI. He will be talking on some environmental assessment and management. Because since this was the beginning of this Stockholm Convention, where assessment and management, this was focused. And we have Professor Ratsana Negi. She will be talking on some challenges. Why we are not able to go into meet. And we will be this, they will be free to talk. This modality of this program will be that they will be sharing their views on this program. Dr. Vaidya is also there. He will be also sharing. And after that, we will not interrupt in between, but whatever we can ask questions after his or her address, whatever they are expressing their views, and in the end also we will take some questions. With this, I begin this program, and I request our director first to give his views on this about this panel discussion. This is all formal, you are open. Audience is open to ask anything. This is not that routine or traditional way we have to go in this program. So you are free, you have to share whatever you think and what we should NEERI should do. Because we are planning to come up with some white paper or some concrete strategy of this program, that how can we contribute in the international convention and treaties. So whichever uncovered in those last 50 years, 60 years, so we can think about that. So with this, I request Dr. Director NEERI to address and formally welcome our guests and audience, participants who are on the online also, and express his views on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. Formally, as NEERI Director, I welcome you all for this panel discussion, which we are holding for the celebration of World Environment Day, which actually is on 5th June. Yesterday, we were paying a holiday, and we did not want to disturb our people on holidays. So we thought of celebrating it on Monday, that is today, that is on 6th. And we thought of changing the format because there will be lectures from experts one or two. Instead of that, there are basically 2-3 milestones which are actually falling this year. One is Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, that is 75th Independence Day. This will be following this year. And incidentally, 50 years of Stockholm Conference 1972, which actually initiated, and I think that was the first genuine attempt by the international agency to bring all nations on one platform towards the environmental cause. Before that, conferences were isolated or attempts were isolated. It was the first kind of unification. And we are into 50th year of that. And we are celebrating this World Environment Day today. And I think in 1972, slogan for that Stockholm Conference was only one Earth. And today is also only one Earth, and that holds true. I think what was true in 72 is still true, rather it is getting more gravity, rather more significance, and we have to seriously think about it. And there is a need to look into the aspect of what has changed in these 50 years. Let us really recapitulate is that 72 was mostly about water. Crux of the situation was focused on water. Then there were many important, like 1990 Earth Conference in Rio, the Montreal Protocol, Kyoto Protocol, Basel Convention, Stockholm Convention, IPCC. There are so many international conventions later on, which already Prakash has taken cognizance of. But the issues have been changing from water to overall environment. Then finally, we are into the area of climate change and sustainability. And therefore, as a NEERI, we also need to reorient our research, our concepts towards the sustainability and towards fighting the climate change, because already all governments across the world are actually basically focusing on climate change issues. And therefore, there is a time to reorient ourselves. And what best we can have our former directors. So I thought of having a panel discussion on this. Idea is to know the views of eminent personalities who have worked for NEERI or outside. Professor Devota was a vice director, many of you know him very well. And he has worked extensively on IPCC, then Montreal Protocol, on all international conventions. In fact, he is the person who pushed me for Stockholm and Conference on IPCC when he was director and I was scientist here. Dr. Bhatte, you know very well, he is a man, complete environmental person, expert, because he has handled environmental impact assessment for so many years and he knows all facets of environment, future, past, everything. So he is a complete environmentalist in himself. And Dr. Negi is also, of course, he is well known in Hungary. I wanted to have one or two more personalities, but that would have been a very long session. So we thought of restricting to 3 persons. So purpose of this panel discussion is to come out with ideas to orient ourselves, orient CSIR-NEERI towards the requirements of our current requirements and future requirements of environmental challenges and research through our past directors and experts. I stop at this juncture right now. Of course, I will be contributing in between, but I would like to say 3 most important things which are focused on today's this year's World Environment Day. One is, they say, it is climate action. Second is nature action, and third is pollution action. Basically, 3 verticals have been defined for this World Environmental Day by the international experts. And in this context, we would like to have panel discussion. And of course, experts are free to express their views and give the focus areas where NEERI has to work. And as a NEERI as a whole, we will take guidance from them, we will take hints from them and try to reorient ourselves. So that will be a real celebration of World Environment Day this year. Thank you very much. I'll leave it to Prakash for comments.
So now we have our eminent panelists, and because some you are new recruits here, so I would like to introduce him before you. Dr. Devota has been an advisor in refrigeration and air conditioning for many prestigious Indian and global technical committees, as well as a consultant for several international agencies, including BIS, GIZ, Government of India Steering Committee on Montreal Protocol, Indo-US Task Force on HFCs, History Refrigeration Committee as Chairman, UNEP Refrigeration Technical Option Committee, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This was big achievement that when he was a director, that it won Nobel Prize also. Then World Bank New Ocean Operations Research Group and IEC working group on chemical refrigerants. Dr. Devata is a former director of the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute and director of Red Scientist at the National Chemical Laboratory Board in India. He received the prestigious Stratospheric Ozone Protection Award in 1997 from the US Environmental Protection Agency. Commendation letters from the Executive Director of UNEP and the President of Switzerland, and the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 as part of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He has published more than 250 research papers in international journals and co-authored several monographs and books. So here we request Dr. Devata to share his views on the subject. Thank you, sir.
Good morning to you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. So let me share my. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning to you all. First of all, I would like to thank the director, the current director, Dr. Vaidya, for inviting me. When he invited me, I was very pleased, but at the same time, I was a bit disappointed that I wouldn't be able to join you in person. However, he was kind enough to accept my presence in a virtual mode. So here I am. I am on a whole personal visit to UK, visiting my son's family. After 2 years of lockdown, we decided to take a break, and we are here for the last 2 months. I will certainly visit NEERI, accepting the invitation sometime in July. I'm so happy World Environment Day. It's 50 years since the Stockholm Convention, 1972. We are in 2022. So I just slightly changed my topic to address multilateral environmental agreements, because that's the area where I have worked for about 40 years, and link it to sustainable development. Sustainable development is the first definition came from Brundtland Commission, which said the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we have to keep this in mind, that whatever we do, we shouldn't be just greedy for our own development today, and we should also leave enough room for the future generation to meet their needs. But one of the most important things in that is that you have to take care of the poor. It's not just sustainable development means catering to the needs of the rich, but also to the needs of the poor. So there are two elements in it, that you have to address poor nations and then present and future needs. Today, if you take environment activities, the UN has defined sustainable development goals. 17 sustainable development goals have been defined. In fact, Government of India has set up a committee to define their own indicators for sustainable development. In 2019, they published a report, and it is all in UN activities. We are now asked to evaluate our work with respect to these development goals. So I am still involved in two of the activities. One is Montreal Protocol, and another is climate change. Whatever we do, we have to write in our report that our activity, our chapter or our activity, whatever we do, how these sustainable development goals are addressed or fulfilled. And in fact, this is a very recent direction given by UN. So each chapter we write at the end how we are meeting the sustainable development in our activity. Then, when the beginning of the millennium, UN also gave Millennium Development. So initially we were trying to address Millennium Development Goal for sustainability, but then Later, it became sustainable development. Today, it is mostly on sustainable growth rather than millennium. Still, some of the activities are implemented as per millennium. There are, as Prakash has said, there are about 356 treaties are being proposed at some point. Most of the treaties, popular treaties, and global atmosphere, because of chemicals. One such treaty called late 80s ozone layer. Then later, this is not my priority. This is the priority of global community. Then UNFCCC, climate change. Then the protocol now is almost oblivion because of political and geopolitical issues. Then there are other clusters. Protocol, Rotterdam Convention, of hazardous waste. But we are involved. We are NEERI. We are involved. But if you go to the MCC, was replaced by. So I will just check what are the issues. When I got involved in the early, we were talking of today it has gone in there. So what we thought as reached in, and people are still saying.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. Your voice is breaking here, so could not hear you. So,
Okay, can you hear now?
yes. Now a little bit you come to closer to your mic, so it will be better.
Okay. So the climate temperature is constantly increasing, and that is known everywhere. And you get every other day news saying that Ahmedabad is having a 45 plus, and Kuwait is having 50 plus. This is because of the climate change, and people have now taken climate change as the most important issue we have to address. And Government of India has agreed that our Prime Minister has given Panchamrit pledge in Glasgow COP26, and he has said that we will meet net zero by 2070. But the global community is targeting 2050 for net zero. And it's not easy. Even by 2070 for India to reach the net zero is a big challenge because we continue to rely on coal. The coal is our main source of power generation for fossil fuel. And therefore, to get out of coal and then go into the high energy efficiency, increase our renewable source, all these things, you need lots of changes and resources. And therefore, we need to work very seriously on carbon reduction. And the one way of dealing with that is hydrogen. So we think the world thinks that the future economy will be on hydrogen. So we have been moving away from hydrogen low fuels to hydrogen rich fuels. If you take ethane, the ratio of hydrogen to carbon is 4, pH 4. But when you put pure hydrogen, you almost touch. So that's how the world is moving towards. low hydrogen fuel, almost pure hydrogen. But pure hydrogen is not going to be available from any source that we have to produce. And therefore, people are looking at how we petrochemical will produce hydrogen very simply. We all know, but that is not going to help us to meet future needs of the people of the electrolysis. Hydrogen water is a real solution. Can't do that without efficiency. Water generation, hydrogen water, and utilization of hydrogen will have multiple types of fuel cells, but purity of hydrogen will increase as you go down in temperature of operation. Proton exchange membrane fuel cell, you will be operating around 80 degrees. The purity of hydrogen and CO level will be very, very CO has to be less than 10 ppm. Hydrogen should not have any sulfur. But if you want to go to high temperature operation like a solid oxide fuel cell, then you can operate with very dirty fuel because the temperature is so high, nothing happens to the system, and you can operate. And one is hydrogen economy, another is unavoidable utilization of fossil fuel. So therefore, I strongly believe that we have to work on carbon capture and utilization and storage. We have a lot of activities. I am personally involved in national and international activities through DST. This, although we are working on utilization, but we are not doing much on storage because of the facts. And this is where NEERI can play a role. We need to do a lot of impact assessment on storage. Storage involves a lot of risk, and people are worried what will happen if you start storing captured carbon dioxide. CCS is still an issue for India, whereas it's a big activity in Europe and US, and utilization is what we are doing, but still we use utilization for chemicals, but we are not using much for other activities, even for the enhanced gas recovery, enhanced oil recovery, and because of the emission industry. So DERI has a strong role to play. How do we address and impact utilization, underground activities? And then motor protocol is that take like 40 years. And today, go to any textbook, and what, but one characteristic for the whole textbook is the
Sir, sorry to interrupt again, your voice is breaking. So can you come closer? Or you can close your video if it is voice quality you get it better.
okay.
So I think
I'm finishing. I'm finishing. There is also one more activity. We call it low carbon pooling DST, where we are addressing how to meet the future demands of air conditioning by providing cooling at the same time having low carbon footprints. This is a huge activity DST is calling for. There are international collaborations on how to meet future demands of cooling in India without increasing the carbon footprint. So I hope that you all have some activities related to this. The final activity, which I'm sure you are all involved, is Stockholm Convention, but POPs. We started this and it is continuing in theory. I'm happy to hear that. Basel Convention is more on managing hazardous waste, and NEERI is known for hazardous waste management, particularly in Dr. Vaidya and his team. Therefore, I feel that you need to look at the international treaties as a challenge and see how we can create more awareness, more technological solutions, and how to take part in these activities. Like, I'm happy to note that there are representations from NEERI and CSIR and IPCC. It continues, but there are much more than IPCC. So we should get involved in these activities to express our concerns, how we can meet the protocol challenges. For instance, net zero. How many of you are involved in net zero? Although it is 2070, but still it's a challenge. So I leave it here, and I leave it to you, and I'll be happy to answer the question. Thank you very much to NEERI. Particularly, I'm happy to see that Dr. Mate is present there, so it's a good to see all the important people participating. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much. It was very enlightening lecture from NEERI. Sir, I have a small question here.
Yeah.
This Stockholm Convention and Brussels Convention NEERI dealing with, but because you have worked in those all protocols and conventions. So when I see those documents, action plan, and all of these conventions, because I have also gone through. So very little bit of sustainable technologies I have seen that one point in action points there are 19 points in Stockholm Convention and 29 points in some Migratory Convention and all. But there I see that very little about the sustainable technology. So is there anything defined in this convention about sustainable technology with respect to water or something? Because there are very standard protocols like that.
Yeah, sure. You see, in all our reports, we address sustainability because there are two things. Sustainability, when you look at the triangle, it's environment on one side and society on the second side, and economic development on the third side. So most of the time, India focuses on environmental things and economics. It's not easy to meet any of the convention without financial aid, particularly for developing country. And India is a leader on behalf of all developing countries to negotiate. This negotiation is a skill which you cannot get unless you get involved with activities having scientific and technological knowledge. You cannot just go and say, yes, I can do it. It's not possible. As you rightly said, is there any sustainability? Yeah, there are many questions on what is feasible. Feasibility has many connotations. Technical feasibility, financial feasibility. So most of the time, we only look at technical feasibility, but not on financial feasibility and who pays for it. And the sustainability, as I said, it also looks at affordability. So you need to have an assessment with respect to all the feasibilities and make a presentation to the international community. How do we meet these challenges within the time frame and within the financial viability? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll take more questions in the end. So thank you very much. Now we'll move to the next segment. Dr. Satish Vate is there, former director. So should I read? No, sir. Actually, it doesn't need any.
Let's start with the.
Yes.
See, ours is an engineering institute, environmental engineering, and any engineering product that we generate through a technology must be our signature in the field, in the masses, in the society. We surface with contribution in the field of technology. Fundamental R&D leading to translational R&D, and translational R&D leading to a technology. We should be weighed on 5 pillars. Pillar number 1, replicability. Pillar number 2, sustainability. That's the topic which Dr. Jewel has just talked about. Pillar number 3, scalability. Pillar number 4, affordability. And pillar number 5, societal acceptance. Anything that we do must have an impact on the society, favorable impact. And must sustain for a long that NEERI will be remembered as long as the technology is used. We are here now for almost 60 years, which we celebrated 2 years before. We have been always flagged as a premier institution in the country as well as abroad. We have so many MOUs signed with so many people. We should be proud of that. Here, what I would like to now, since the topic given is environmental assessment and management, it's all that it encompasses everything. Maybe all conventions that we have, maybe all the protocols that we narrate right down. As an engineer or a scientist, we must first look at it, what is my contribution to this? Yesterday, Prime Minister talked on recycle recovery. Just look at it and make a brainstorming internally with the director. How many recycle recovery technologies which NEERI has produced and which are in the field today operating? What R&D we have done? Is the R&D or was the R&D enough to take it to a level where it comes to a fruition? Well planned, we all thought of not output, we thought of outcome. A project must result into a technology which is scalable and which can be put into the field for the benefit of mankind. R&D must not be forgotten at any level as base R&D as well as applied R&D. Applied R&D is our fundamentals. The institute has been created to cater to the technologies which will benefit the environment and the society on an economic scale with a proper governance. 4 pillars of sustainability are economy, environment, society, and the 4th is now governance. We may not play a major role in governance, but can we not sit down and generate a SOP? How to operate this technology which will be continually operated for 10-15 years? When we design a treatment plant, we take the life of the plant as 15 years. Design it with a scale at least 1.6 times so that it meets the future requirement. Design it in such a fashion that it has a flexibility, environment being dynamic, it can accommodate the changes that it can occur in a modular form or in a modified form into a technology so that you don't have to revisit the technology again in terms of its placement. It's time now that we should become synonym with all any projects and problems with the government states in the country as well abroad that take NEERI as partner. Your signature should be that NEERI has to be partner. Today it happens in Nagpur. Any problem the local government faces, they will first contact Dr. Vaidya, we have this problem. This is a credibility that has been earned by this institute for so many years and sustained it. But those who are new and those still are old here but have looked into what has gone into the past must look at it that where have we made an error, did not notice it, and continued with the error-prone technology where we could not get an answer. We should be bold enough to accept that the technology has gone wrong. There can be a possibility that a technology can be also spoiled, sabotaged. Nalgonda technique, 1960s, was made for half an hour detention time with removal of chloride. Somebody wanted to spoil that, they put it on a running water coming from a borewell and said that it is not working. Unless there is a reaction time given, as you all know, the reaction will not be good. It has to be designed, defined, operated, all those parameters which are given in the in the design basic document. It is designed to a scale as per the basic document and modified as per the requirement of the field. Environmental impact assessment definitely defines identifying a problem. Anywhere, identify a problem. Having identified a problem, make a problem statement with the quantification available. Can you say that do you have now or we have capabilities to information generation on a GIS platform which we have, connecting it with GPS that we have, putting it on an advanced computing tool as an iCloud or ArcRAM or GMAP or GPAC or Python platform. We have to keep on improving ourselves in the area where we need to be running ahead of time rather than with the time. Your thinking should be to be ahead of time. What is the requirement? So much of database is being generated. We talked of time series data. Where is the time series data available? Why do you have to generate information again and again when the information should have been at the click of the button? Why it happens? If it happens, then it is somewhere we have lacked in generating the database correctly and storing it correctly. Do we also keep a track of problem statements given by our leaders? Yesterday, Kendriya Minister talked on methanol, ethanol from sugar. You must listen to that talk. It's on YouTube, it must be. How many of us have thought that time that converting sugar into ethanol is known science, it's not nothing new. But how many of us thought that if ethanol as a product in the reactor becomes a limiting state, as a feedback inhibition, you have a strain that you have developed which can stand 20% alcohol, 30% alcohol. Sugar is all controllable, convertible. The glucose, fructose easily convertible. Two carbon compound can easily come. Ethanol is a non-liquid. Have you thought anybody that in 80s and 90s we thought of technology to come as a biotechnology support? Dr. Khanna was here. It did not sustain because we thought it as that one-time pastime. Director says, so we do it. Director goes, we forget. The limiting step, as a chemical engineer, Dr. Vaidya can advise you and others can also tell you on that. The reaction in the reactor is controlled by the product that it generates, and the removal of product, it does not take place. The reaction does not go in the forward direction. R does not go to product unless the product is removed. Can you think of this as a challenge? Today, problem is identified. We have to go on ethanol. Prime Minister has already said 10% ethanol blending we have achieved. We are going green. Tomorrow it could be 20. Can it be 100%? Can you take it as a challenge today that we get onto ethanol, produce it from sugar, develop a strain, develop and design a reactor which can continuously bleed out ethanol, separating it from a froth, allowing it to decant, and then allow the production to go in the direction, in the forward direction, uninterrupted. Engineering challenge as well as R&D challenge. One challenge that I'm giving it to us as stay with what is required. Hydrogen. We worked on hydrogen storage 10 years before. Storage is an essential part of hydrogen energy utilization. You can't take hydrogen, generate and use it there itself like we do solar panel. It has to be converted into an energy which has to be transported. Can you think of a storage? Can you have an industry identified? Can you multiply it and scale it to a level that tomorrow the storage technology is provided by NEERI in the headline? Can it happen? Because this is a challenge. Tomorrow, if carbon neutral country has to be made by 2015, 2050, and if 2030 has been identified as a carbon neutral by some industry, there must be some think tank that they have. There must be something in their mind that they can achieve it. How? Where we have lacked in understanding that what storage is required on a scale. It cannot be small space, it has to be huge storage. Electrolyzer, hydrogen generation. Even necessary. How many of us have contributed to electrolyzer design and its production in the country? Rather, we are depending on outsiders to provide it. Why outside players should come and tell us that we should use our electrolyzer? Where are we lacking in that? This institute has been mandated with public health in 58, changed it to Environmental Engineering Institute in 74, with a broad scope of work. A broad spectrum was given to us. Air pollution control, water pollution, noise pollution, solid waste management, soil management. These are all thrown at us as challenges. Do a recap on that, revisit. Technologies on water. Today, even BST takes out a call on water management, water quality management, water storage management, water distribution and management, water purification and management. Where are we? Why don't they refer that follow NEERI technology on total purification of water? Distribution. Since the days even I was not here, distribution was a major component of NEERI. Leak detection, we used to call it as. What do you do with that leak detection? Where is the management? Remember, any R&D that we do, any profile that you generate as a process flow sheet, if it does not form a part of a final technology on a scale, all that has been done is gone. It is something like in biochemistry parlance, initiation, elongation, and termination of a protein formation. Initiate, elongate, and terminate, and suddenly you get a nonsense codon. Termination stop. It is terminated without getting into the print that is wanted from that particular DNA. You have done everything, but the product is not. This is something which you have to look at it. Recycle recovery technologies. How many air pollution institutions are working in the country? Number. NEERI should have been pioneer in working out an air purifier at the industry. We should have had given us a flue gas decarbonization. Desulfurization is already there. Carbon dioxide control at source. We understand what is source, what is receptor. We know that. Environmental impact assessment, environmental management, always aim at identify the problem at source. We are good at that. If you are not, we must know where the problem lies, where it generates, where it surfaces. Can you think of preventive technology there itself so that it does not surface? And if it surfaces and becomes a residue, do you have a control technology? Carbon dioxide sequestration will come later. But carbon dioxide absorption right at the source has to be a technology which you should give it to the industry. They jump at it. It will become a part of their DPR. And once it becomes a part of DPR, NEERI is attached permanently with a technology which is good for desulfurization of carbon dioxide, removal of carbon dioxide at the source, at 300 degrees, at 100 degrees, at any degree that you mention. It has to be temperature sensitive, volume sensitive. Then once you absorb, you should have a desorption technology. Where do you take it? Carbon dioxide. How do you use it and how do you use it? If you don't think of it, sir, I have absorbed. What do I do with that? Unless you remove that carbon dioxide and use it into a carbon sequestration. Fertilizers are using this carbon coming from two carbon compounds. Can you not have a carbon dioxide to fertilizer utilization to generate media? You have to think in that generating a problem and then tackling it as a control mechanism rather than thinking ahead and preventing it right at the source. And when it goes to receptor, carbon capture, utilization and storage technology is a new call which BST has given. NEERI has a proposal in that. What do you think of carbon capture, storage, utilization should look like? Mimic a tree. Nothing like tree which has demonstrated carbon capture, which demonstrates storage and utilization. It's full technology. A tree is a full technology for carbon capture, storage, utilization as a technology. Mimic it. Find out what happens. How carbon dioxide will be stored in either carbon form as organic or as carbon as inorganic carbon and utilized either for production of food or for production of any fertilizer or anything else. Take a fiber out of it, take fuel out of it, take fertilizer out of it. Anything that you want, you can take it out. This is something which you have to think as what my involvement is. We are looking at problems generated by ourselves, noted by ourselves through discussions in the workshops, plus listen to the problems which are given by the leaders in this group. Har Ghar Nal, what have you done on that? Have you thought of anything that NEERI can contribute on Har Ghar Nal? We had a 12-month project. Nitin was leading that. A huge holistic problem. But then, when it comes to ultimately delivery, why should we why should not be part of that? Why not we be a program partner or even the leader, I would say, as NEERI, which I know that because I am so proud of my institute, because I am made up of this institute. I still contribute to this institute's growth wherever I can. Impact assessment notification came, NEERI was a partner to evaluate it. Mining problems came, NEERI became a partner to evaluate it. Now, why NEERI? I included CMRS also into this. This is where you have to look at it, that how do you mimic a technology which is very near to nature. Solutions are available. Treatment technologies, RC Wala started with PG with nature. He started with storage tanks. Wherever land is available, don't enter into technology. Allow the water to come into the pond, get it treated by the natural process and get it out of it by using either water acid or algae or bacteria or fungi, anything, and get it out. It's a natural treatment. When you come to a technology of treatment, why not we mimic earth? It's a full technology. Primary treatment, adsorption. Secondary treatment, decomposition. Tertiary treatment, utilization as a product. Quaternary treatment, delivering water into the ground. This is what the earth does. Why not this technology be mimicked and thought of that this technology is there? Look at it. I want this institute not to be recognized as only problem solver on a scale which is R&D, but I want it on a scale to remain partner with the country forever. Showcase to us, all of you together, strengthen his hands or the hands of the institute. Directors come and go. He will come and go, but the institute remains. It should be remembered always. For contributions that are made, that remains at every day is a Paryavaran Day. Whether it is Jagtik or whether it is international, whether it is national, anything. We are there all through the years. It is seen. There is a call on water, on storages, on distribution. We are there. We have done so much of work. Do we have anything as we can claim that I have a purifier manufacturer? We did work a lot on air pollution control, but it was all monitoring that working. We generate the data. NEERI data is available. What do I do with that NEERI data? Dynamics is a key function or basic evaluation criteria of environmental management. It must be understood. What is done in past is gone, it's history. It has to be surfaced with, aligned with what dynamics I get. In water, I have to have a model which can give me a critical zone mapping, water distribution all across the terrains that it can have, surface water redistribution onto surface, into the lakes, into the rivers, into the groundwater. Solid waste, I must have a solution. This institute is working since 1970. Solid waste division was created by RC Wala. Now you fully aware that what problem faces. Today still we have to have a committee to manage and constitute the committee to find out whether this can be done or not. Segregation we have done at the source, at the deposits. We have all know that this is 400 kg could come as a, from the ton as organics, 100 will come as plastics, 500 will come as earth and inerts. everything is utilizable. Utilization technology. It has to be focused on natural resource utilization technology. Not allow a natural resource to get out again back to the environment as a waste. And it is possible. Total recycle, the nature recycles it. Carbon cycle we have learned. Nitrogen cycle we have learned. Water cycle we see every time. But where is that we do that? Everything that comes out has a cycle which goes into a product. Utilization technology has to be our focus. Resource utilization. Renewable waste correction, renewable energy generation. Renewable resource conservation, propagation, protection. Then convert that into a technology. The nature has blessed you a lot. It will come again. Harness the source, don't harvest it. Harnessing is utilizing it to a level where it is allowed to be utilized. Harvest is destroy it. We do it only in agriculture because we know that it will come back again. But don't do it everywhere. You focus on water, focus on air, focus on plastics, focus on solid waste, focus on noise. And then technologies which lead to sustainability in terms of carbon capture, storage, utilization, water recycle, reuse, totality. Nagpur needs 300 ml of water for plantation and for watering the grounds. 470 ml we use. We generate sewage. It should be a part of Nagpur should be correction. NEERI should be a part of everything that's happening in Nagpur. To show it is as a model on a national level. Look at what Nagpur does with NEERI, do it everywhere with NEERI. You will be known. All treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, recycle the water it delivers as a quality which is, those who understand water, is a quality seawater quality. Use it with disinfection for drinking, but use it for a purpose of industry. Plantation, agriculture, construction, irrigation, and then watering the grounds. Prime Minister has announced, Hello India. Create the grounds, tell them that this water is recycled by the treatment plants designed by NEERI and is being utilized without any impact on the health. Take any soil and find out there is no bacteria which has a disinfection impact. Disinfection technologies. We have a large canvas. I'll tell you, if you decide every one of you can be a vertical in the institute to generate a technology which takes NEERI to a level on an horizontal mode with a vertical mode, so much high that you will never see that people will look at it only as unattainable. That should be the way that we should reach to that level where you will be unparalleled. My speech was slightly digressing to a level, giving as an appeal rather than sticking to what has been said. But you have to find out a problem identified at source, control it if it is possible at source. If not, let it come to a residue, control it at residue. If still it is not, generate a remediation technology. We have three technologies: preventive, control, and remediation. What is remediation? Reverse the damage. Today I am penalizing so many industries on violation projects for ecological damage that they have done without having any EMP in place and penalizing them with a job that they must do, not paying the money to the ministry. They must do and take their bank guarantee back. What it requires is a proper damage assessment on ecology, ecological damage, and ecological remediation. Spend money on remediation. Natural resource augmentation. You have used the natural resource without permission. Taken water, charge them at 100 rupees per ton, which is normally 5 rupees per ton. You have used air without the permission. You have used soil without knowing and without, you have removed the plants, plant them 10 times. Community resource augmentation. You have encroached on the community resources which otherwise community should have used as either water or as air or as plant or as fodder or as fuel. You have deprived them of pay for that. NEERI can be a partner in this. Resource augmentation, directors of natural resource augmentation programs and plans and technologies should be one priority. Recycle recovery technology should be another priority. Aligning with industries to generate hydrogen and storage and its transportation. I understand I had a talk with Rambabu. They are already in discussion with the technology which we has provided. These are future things. Carbon capture, storage, utilization, we make a plant. Nothing like plant that you can ever have a technology which can indicate that what carbon you can capture, how it is utilized and how it is stored, and how it can be further concentrated. It will give you climate change. Big benefit. 1 ton of carbon dioxide is 1 credit. One tree, which is banyan tree, absorbs about 4 tons of carbon in a year. If you think of it, look at how many plants you generate, you plant and how much carbon dioxide you sequester, which you remove. The problem that you are facing 400 milligrams per cubic meter is carbon dioxide concentration, it will come down to 180 milligrams per day. Don't generate it if you can. If you can generate, if you have to generate, sequester. These are areas that we should work. These are future areas. This will answer every program of UN, every program of common parties, the parties who are discussing on conferences of parties. It will come back. It will help even change the precipitation. Rainwater structures. How many rainwater harvesting structures we create and generate and protect them? How many of us are working in that area and design a rainwater structure on the basis of NEERI design? We worked in grey water treatment long back, which did not take a shape of a scale because it was not much floated. But rainwater harvesting we can do. Create a structure. Give it to a house. Every individual should have a NEERI technology. When the town planning approves it, should have a NEERI technology for rainwater structure. Allow the train to come and get it into your own area where it will be borewell. Take it out from there. Composting. He has said to us, you first do it at our home, then talk to me. This is what he told once, and that's true. Start with yourself. This is what you have to tell them, but NEERI must be handled. Please do that. If you do that, I think I have exceeded the time. I think NEERI, and I'll be proud of NEERI, and continue to remain as proud as I am with NEERI with the technology that we want to do. I'll be happy to, because I'm on so many committees to evaluate our technologies, but I'll definitely see that. हिंदी में कहेंगे मेरा वहां पे सर गर्व से ऐसा ऊंचा होना चाहिए कि NEERI टेक्नोलॉजी. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much. Actually, it was very interesting, and today I came to know when I was going for presenting AI report in position for report that your time with your AI. So what I observed when I was entering the room, the experts were asking very Dr. Bote. So today I came to know that why they were asking Dr. Bote, and frequently this happens, not once. So you are well-known person in this area.
I should be known in NEERI only. That's all.
No, you are known in technical community. So, sir, I have one question, but I will ask in the end, and we will take some questions also. So, madam is ready. So, madam, should I read your biodata or? No. So, start directly because you are from Lemonade Institute, distinguished JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, madam is professor at Jawaharlal University and she is dealing with international studies. So, may I request you, madam, to address, to share your views on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Vaidya and Dr. Prakash Kumbhare, thank you very much for having me here, for inviting me. Morning. Dr. Devata and Dr. Bate, also, it was a pleasure hearing you speak. It is, of course, a little intimidating for me because unlike everybody else in the room, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I'm not from that background. And my background really is in the sphere of public policy, diplomacy, international relations, etc. So the reason why I didn't want this long introduction is that I'd rather spend time talking about this fascinating aspect that is being discussed today. So I was asked to speak on international environmental commitments, and also I would like to link it to the institution that you are currently physically present in. The occasion on which we are meeting is, of course, the 50th a commemoration of the Stockholm Conference of 1972. Now, in international environmental negotiations, the 1972 conference holds a very, very important place. It isn't as if environmental awareness had not emerged. There were already countries taking at the national level actions towards environmental protection in the 1960s as well. And one of the seminal works that really led to this environmental awareness was a book titled The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And that came from a scientist. And the reason why I mentioned that book is to constantly highlight the theme that science is really the underlying push factor in all of environmental diplomacy and environmental politics at the international level. So the 1960s, you see this as a decade of growing environmental movement in several countries, starting with the United States and Europe and spreading elsewhere. But by the 1970s, you have this recognition that environmental problems have a cross-border impact and therefore they require international cooperation. And it is in this context that you have the Stockholm Conference take place in 1972. This is a landmark step in international protection. And for the first time, in the words of Maurice Strong, who was basically heading this conference, he said that the conference is a realization that man has come to one of the seminal points in history, where he knows that his own activities are the principal determinants of his own future. Now, this is a very key and interesting idea, which we now see also in the context of the new science, which is indicating to us this new era that we are in, referencing what is called the Anthropocene, in the context of the impact of this single species, the Homo sapiens, on their environment. Now, I just want to spend a little bit of time at the Stockholm Conference, and then at the Stockholm 50 Plus Conference, and then to whatever happened in between. I know it's a tall order, but I'll just skim through it as quickly as I can. So at Stockholm, the then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was the only head of state who was present other than the host state, Sweden. This is a well-known fact. And in her speech, she described the conference as, quote, man's earnest endeavor to prolong his tenancy of this planet. This is an interesting way of projecting it, that we are tenants in the planet. A simple stated observation in her speech, which reads as follows, quote, we are supposed to belong to the same family, yet we inhabit a divided world. This quote has come to represent the core reality of international environmental politics, wherein attempts at addressing problems that are increasingly universal in scope falter when states prioritize their self-interests or behave like free riders. The core argument also contained in the principle of differentiated responsibilities, which is now popularly known in the climate change negotiations, also find a place in this speech, which said, quote, many of the advanced countries of today have reached their present affluence by their domination over other races and countries, the exploitation of their own natural resources. And now, as we struggle, by we, she's referring to the developing countries, to create a better life for our own people, it is in vastly different circumstances. Last, there is also the most oft quoted line from this speech, which said, are not poverty and need the greatest polluters? How can we speak of those who live in villages and in slums about keeping the oceans, rivers, and air clean when their own lives are contaminated at source? And the interesting line that is added in this speech here is, the environment cannot be improved in conditions of poverty, nor can poverty be eradicated without the use of science and technology. So it is in no uncertain terms that the call for international action, was made in the 1972 Stockholm Conference, and it was in the commemoration of this event that the 50 years commemoration took place just last week in Sweden at Stockholm, under the banner of the title "A Healthy Planet for the prosperity of all. Again, linking the health of the planet to individual prosperity. In the context of the role that India has played, just a week ago, a few weeks ago, in an op-ed that was written by the executive director of the UNEP, she clearly states that the role that India plays in taking forward this whole movement towards international environmental sustainability objectives, etc., will be seminal, just as it was in the 1972 Stockholm Conference, etc. So this is something worth noting, worth taking note of, etc. Now, when we look back at the years between these two Stockholm conferences, the Stockholm of last week and the 1972, I hope I'm audible. I sometimes see my photograph freezing, so I just hope I'm audible.
Madam, you are audible. Just little while I will just your voice was breaking, but now it's okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Yes. So please let me know in case I go off the network. The years between the two Stockholm conferences are really, the interesting 50 years of the explosive growth in the frameworks to protect the environment, both in the context of international legal as well as institutional frameworks. If you look back and look at the 1970s, which was the context of the 1972 Stockholm Conference, you see the identification of conservation of species and ecosystems, and the responses that were designed to address these in some of the early international conventions, some of which Dr. Devata also mentioned in his presentation. So the 1971 Ramsar Convention, for example, to protect wetlands, which is an ecosystem-directed treaty. Also the 1972 World Heritage Convention, which has within its ambit both cultural as well as natural heritage sites and their protection. And a very interesting new treaty at that time, 1973.
Madam, you are not audible yet.
Am I audible?
Yes, now we are.
Okay, I'm sorry. Should I go back a little bit? I was just mentioning then, the initial stages after the Stockholm Convention, where in the 1970s we find some of the early international treaties or conventions which focus upon species and ecosystem conservation. And I mentioned 4 of these. One, the Ramsar Convention of 1971, which essentially protects wetlands, or the objective is to protect wetlands, and there is an international list of wetlands of international importance, which now lists about 2,439 such lists, 49 of which are located in India. You also have World Heritage Convention according protection to the heritage sites, both cultural and natural. And in this case, there are about 7 natural sites that you find located in India. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species addresses the market really. So whereas the Heritage and Ramsar Convention looked at protecting certain given sites, the CITES looks at, it puts in place a certification system wherein whenever you are trading in any wildlife products or wildlife, a certain certification system will be put in place. And this will be based on inputs from scientific committees, which will first assess the level, the conservation status of the particular wildlife that is being traded in. And the last treaty that I mentioned is the 1979 Bonn Convention on Migratory species, all 3 types, avian, terrestrial, and marine, basically recognizing that in the case of migratory species, of course, cross-border cooperation is absolutely essential. Now, if you club these conventions together, the focus was largely on what we refer to as green issues, which are conservation issues, which address the question of how much can this earth give. So whether it is deforestation or fisheries, etc. But the 1980s onwards, you see a shift towards the brown issues, and this is where I guess the focus of the work of an institution like NEERI would be more interesting. Now, the brown issues answer the question of how much can the earth take. So whatever we are putting into the Earth's atmosphere, into its ecosystems, in terms of pollution, in terms of ozone depletion or climate change, how do we clean all of that? So the 1980s are characterized by the development of the ozone regime, which included the 1985 Vienna Convention and its Montreal Protocol that has already been discussed, so I will not spend time on it. But also the Basel Convention of 1989 to look at hazardous waste, especially the transboundary movement of hazardous waste from the richer countries to the less developed countries. These were still, issue-specific or sector-specific treaties that you saw right through the 1980s. The big change that you see post-1990s, and especially post the big international event of the Rio Earth Summit of 1992, is this expansive viewing of environmental concerns. By now, the principle of sustainable development had also come on board as per the Brundtland Committee report, having defined it. And post 1992, you see these really, large scoped conventions come into existence, two of which in particular include the Convention on Biological Diversity and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which of course is very well known to everyone. Both these conventions follow a process where subsequent additions are made through protocols which are legally linked to the mother convention. So I'm referring here both to the Kyoto Protocol and of course subsequently the Paris Agreement as far as climate change is concerned, but two very science-specific protocols of the Biodiversity Convention. One relating to biosafety, which is the trade in living modified organisms in 2000, and the other dealing with biopiracy, another fascinating issue area as far as India is concerned. So post 1990s, there is both a very expansive look at what are called universal sort of issues with a very broad universal reach, but also a specific focus on science-related issues like biosafety, etc. There are also two important conventions at this time. One, the 1998 Rotterdam Convention on Chemical Wastes, and the 2000 Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants. All three of these, the Rotterdam, Stockholm, and Basel Convention, are now clubbed together in the international negotiations. And just last week, we had the latest sort of negotiations going on the so-called BRS issues. So post 2000s, this whole phase that I'm taking you through has of course seen its ups and downs. There are times, for example, when you had the global financial crisis, when the issue of environment sort of lost traction because the focus was so much on the economy, etc. There was also a period of stalled negotiation. Most of us remember how the climate negotiations were not moving forward, how the Copenhagen Conference was a huge failure as far as climate change negotiations were concerned. But 2015 onwards, there are at least two developments. One, the adoption of the Sustainable Development Development Goals, which actually put all of global development in a sustainability framework. And there are several SDGs that directly link with environment. For example, there is one on sustainable cities and communities, climate action. There's one on life below water, life on land, etc. And the one which I feel is one of the most important SDGs in future, especially is SDG 12, which is about responsible consumption and production. You also saw in 2015, finally, the climate change agreement, coming through, and the Paris Agreement being adopted. Although it was a change in direction from the Kyoto Protocol in the manner in which it works, but nevertheless, it was at least a move forward in terms of agreement. There are several currently ongoing negotiations on that today are very, very important. So you have, for example, ongoing negotiations on biodiversity beyond natural jurisdictions, or the BBNJ negotiations. You also have negotiations on plastic waste, right? Especially marine plastic waste, etc., which are ongoing. These sort of the evolution of the legal framework has been complemented with also institutional developments. So on the one hand, you have the United Nations Environment Program, which was created for the follow-up of the 1972 Stockholm Conference. You had the Commission on Sustainable Development, which was the institutional follow-up to the Rio Earth Summit. And currently, you have what is called the High-Level Political Forum, which follows up on the developments post or relating to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. So as you can see, between the two Stockholms, there has been this huge proliferation of international treaties, multilateral environmental agreements, also institutional developments. Each of these multilateral environmental agreements have their own secretariats which operate or operationalize these agreements. And alongside, there has also been a growth of several legal principles that determine the operation of these agreements. For example, some of the better known principles include those of sustainable development, of the precautionary principle, or the polluter pays principle, the sic utro tuo principle, etc. These have been also visible in several of the international disputes relating to sustainability issues, etc. This was as brief as I could make it, although it's very difficult. But what I would like to really highlight is that from a very, very focused approach, which looked more at issues of conservation, we have moved to the so-called brown issues, which have become of increasing concern, which is wastes of various types, which also means the handling of hazardous substances and things that we are putting into the environment and into the various ecosystems. By way of concluding remarks, I want to specifically address the institution NEERI, CSIR-NEERI, and what could be the possibilities, right? Of course, these come from a layperson, these come from a non-science person, so I hope they will be taken in good spirit. One is that a 50-year assessment of the contribution of environmental engineering and technology in addressing sustainability objectives in India. I'm sure this exists already in various different forms, perhaps from other institutions, but this could be the best institution and the most authoritative one from which it could come. And this would be an appropriate and apt time to actually look at this. The second suggestion would be that of mapping the potential interface with the existing multilateral environmental agreements and engaging with the implementation of the MEAs. Here, of course, the focus would be more on those relating to the brown issues, but also there is scope in the MEAs relating to the green issues. Just by way of example, I would again guide your attention to India's climate nationally determined contributions, for example, and the 5 pledges at Glasgow that were mentioned, the Panchamrit, which was announced by Prime Minister Modi at Glasgow, net zero emissions by 2070, non-fossil fuel energy capacity of 500 gigawatts by 2030, 50% energy requirements from renewable sources, reduction in the total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons and reducing the carbon intensity of the economy to less than 45%. Now, all of this, obviously, implementation of these would require the intervention of the scientists, the engineers, etc. So this is typically a second sort of area that I think would be useful, which is already, of course, being considered. A third would be contributing to the scientific discourse at the international level, such as by participating in international scientific bodies like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And as I heard from the introduction, this is already in place. The fourth suggestion that I would like to make is the bringing together of the objectives of environmental conservation and public health concerns. You see how the climate change people kept shouting about reducing air travel, reducing unnecessary movement, etc., and nothing happened. Right? Nothing happened. But the world came to a screeching halt once COVID-19 came. So the moment an issue is a public health concern, it is taken far more seriously. And perhaps NEERI is the best located institution to give this message, because when I read its history, I find that in 1958, it was actually set up as the Central Public Health Engineering Research Institute, and the original mandate was that of public health, and it was only in 1974 that environmental conservation was added. I think it is high time that the public health and environmental concerns be merged in order to make them more implementable in a serious fashion. This is something which will be a huge contribution. Fifth and last comment that I have is that, of course, it is extremely important for public policy and diplomacy to come together with the scientific and technological fixes. So at one level, countries can go on negotiating, hundreds and thousands of environmental agreements and setting up institutions and coming up with new legal principles. But the science and technology can sometimes come up with, a completely innovative fix. Let me end on a light note, therefore, to remind you of one very interesting historical event. It's a true event. It is referred to in history as the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. One of the earliest so-called problems in urban environment was seen to be the fact that all of London and all of New York was, that the traffic consisted of horse-drawn carriages. And the big concern and issue was that there was so much manure being produced that the media at that time was writing that the earth would end, the world would end because it would be drowned in horse manure, right? There wasn't enough. And there was an international conference held in the United States to actually address this issue. The conference failed. Public policy could not come out or diplomacy could not come out with a solution. But in the end, the problem fizzled out because of a technological intervention. And that was the coming into the market of the automobile car. So the first advertisements you see of the Ford T-Mobile say that you don't have to depend on horses anymore. So this whole issue, which at that time was a great environmental crisis of what to do with horse manure, actually got resolved. Of course, once you have had the vehicles on the road and once those numbers increased, that led to its own problems, right? Which also highlights the fact that science and technological innovation sometimes also is the cause of problems. So the impact assessment is something that has to be continuously inbuilt. But the point I'm trying to make, therefore, is that public policy and diplomacy interventions have only a limited role to play. Ultimately, for environmental, for sustainability objects, these will have to be complemented by the science and technological innovations. So whether it is what the previous two panelists spoke about, carbon capture and sequestration or usage and storage, etc., or new technologies that address all of the current environmental concerns, diplomacy alone will not make it there. So with this, I sign off with all best wishes to the institution, to NEERI, and thank you once again for giving me time to speak.
Thank you, man. Thank you. So we'll take a few questions from audience. You have to mention to whom you are asking a specific question. Anyone? Or from our online viewers? Anyone? Saviri, please indicate if convey me if anyone is there to ask any question.
Identify yourself. Identify yourself who is asking question. No question. Everybody is ready for last
From audience?
Meanwhile,
more of science and technology. So I think there was some poverty and lunch also related to economy. Probably.
Madam, you have to say something.
I said since there aren't questions from the audience, maybe I can take this occasion to ask a question from my co-panelists, because I was very interested to hear, especially about this technology about carbon sequestration, or it's known in various ways, CCUS, as you said, Dr. Devata. I just wanted to ask both panelists about the risk assessment of CCS, of this technology. I had the occasion to visit a CCS plant once located in Germany, and the feeling which you get when you enter these plants is actually the same as if it were a nuclear installation or a nuclear plant, because there are safety norms, etc. And there is a lot of fear associated with the possible negative fallouts in case, what it could do to the groundwater, or whether it could be safely kept underground for long periods of time, etc. So at the moment, where does this technology stand? How safe is it in your view? Is it a viable alternative, to address the climate change problem?
Can I answer that question, please?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. See, you have raised a very ticklish issue, the safety. It is one of the most troubling aspects of carbon storage. Still, it is not resolved. But the problem is, if you don't resort to storage, you cannot tackle carbon capture, mitigation strategy, because the storage is the ultimate solution in terms of possibility. Otherwise, utilization can lead to few gigatons of avoidance, whereas storage can lead to major few gigatons of more than a few gigatons of carbon storage, carbon management mitigation. Therefore, storage has become although it is impossible to avoid all the risks, but people are moving towards storage because of the huge opportunity it offers. And still, any subterranean, ground, underground activities involves many risks, and people are looking at how to avoid the risk. And there are many projects addressing safety aspects of, including DST project. There is an IIT Bombay, IIT Mumbai center, which is looking at these aspects of risk assessment. That's where I addressed that Dr. Vate, being an EA man in all his life, NEERI should look at what are the risks involved and what are the mitigation opportunities, so that the public will accept storage as an option. Public today does not want any activity on, in the underground activities in India. Yeah. Whereas in Europe, somehow the Germany, Norway, Sweden, they are moving on, including US. But we have not started. Even for carbon, forget about storage aspect. even enhanced oil recovery is not yet fully matured in India. Using carbon dioxide because of many issues, including risk, but also water. You have water management issue in the enhanced oil recovery, enhanced gas recovery. So there are many issues related to carbon storage, and we have to go a long way in getting it resolved. And NEERI has a lot of role to play. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
To add to what Dr. Devata had said about the risk assessments, it is all the workplace where you need to capture carbon dioxide where it is originated. The temperatures are different. You need to absorb that using metal organic frameworks, using a structure. And once you get carbon dioxide absorbed, the release of carbon dioxide at a higher temperature is somewhat a risk. Because you are looking at temperature changes suddenly. As Dr. Archana said about the risk assessment, the risk that way at the industry level is operating a new system. The tail gas. The question is that are we only having carbon dioxide as only the gas? There are other gases or sites also. To what extent the organic frameworks that we use or metal organic frameworks that we use has to be properly understood. But this technology, though it is demonstrated at some places, but still has not taken a shape of being used as a full-fledged technology. And I still feel that using carbon reduction at the source perhaps may take time, but using carbon dioxide as a source for sequestration perhaps should be developed as a more technology, as a technology which definitely can help addressing the climate change. The risk is always a part of any industrial activity that we study, and without the risk, no report is accepted. So, as you rightly said, risk assessment has to be a part of any impact assessment that is done, whatever is the activity. Right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
From audience, any questions?
The only thing that I would like to tell that all those issues which are raised by Devata as well as by Archana and even I had raised, I'm very confident. NEERI can handle it. I don't know where from this confidence comes to me, but NEERI definitely has a potential, has the facilities, has the right mindset.
We shall try to come up with
No, it is definitely there. It is there. Only thing that I would like to see that you know the potential that you have, convert it into a kinetic mode. Where if you feel that there is some problem that you want to change from potential to kinetics, it has to be done only through discussions, and you can do it.
Yeah,
I have confidence on this.
somebody has raised.
Good afternoon, I am Subramani, and I have my first question at the map. And India want to get away from petroleum products not only because of the environmental issue but also because of the import issue. So, in public policy and diplomacy, we are moving towards the EV battery technology. But the ingredients in battery technology is I have read that the main components are F block elements, inner transition elements, and many of the inner transition elements also with our neighbors. I think so, and it will lead again to importing the battery ingredients from the neighbors. So again, it will lead to export-import deficit. So I want to need clarity in this issue.
Now, this question is addressed to you. Professor Archana,
Sorry, to me?
Yes.
it is regarding policy.
Could you help me?
Yeah, question is that
Because I
when
hear it very clearly.
you could get the question. You could get the question, madam.
I could not hear very clearly.
Okay, the question I will just repeat it on his behalf is related to policy matter. What it says that to minimize our dependency on import for fossil fuels, which we are not self-sufficient, we are trying to shift to other fuels, like, and then we are promoting electronic vehicles, which battery cost for a lot of wearers or block elements in the periodic table. Will it not lead to dependency on our neighbors for that? When it's shifting from dependency of fuel to dependency for metals. That is the question.
I see. So as I broadly get it, I'm not sure if this is exactly, but please correct me if I'm wrong. This broadly refers to the interface where you are, where there are two objectives which appear to be in contradiction. So you have a sustainability objective, but you also have an objective of trade. So usually in issues such as this, what happens is a cost-benefit analysis. And unfortunately, in the case of sustainability issues, normally the other issues, whether it is development or trade or security, tend to trump over issues of sustainability. So like you are saying, that if there is a decision to be taken relating to trade, import or export, etc., and if it is done on the basis of a sustainability concern, then usually if there are economics, the economics of it will tend to override the issues of sustainability, and that's the real core concern of how to implement the issue of sustainable development, the three parts of the triangle that were mentioned before of economy, society and ecology. The interface is always very fascinating. There's a huge sort of literature on that, on environment versus trade, environment versus development, environment versus security, etc. And it will always be a cost-benefit analysis in every case.
Yeah.
I'm not sure but I welcome, if you can clarify to me further what your question precisely is, but this is what I've understood.
I think it's okay. I think basically you are mixing two different issues at this place. One is sustainability. Second has some different connotation and some different contexts. So one is technical question, second is political or something. It's a bit different from that. So anyway, but I think you have answered that quite close answer was given. And
I can add something.
Yeah, sure, sir, sure.
Yeah, see, technically addressing this question, I would say I'm somewhat against EVs, electric vehicles, being introduced in India because to address carbon footprint. Because as long as we are generating power on fossil fuel, EV introduction will not reduce our carbon footprint, because our carbon footprint for power generation is much higher than global average. It is only for clean air, but not for reducing the carbon footprint. Yeah.
Thank you. That is also correct. I think we can take more questions, but then we are approaching lunch, and I request Prakash to have the question. Is there any online question? Online?
Yes, I think Deepanjan. You can ask Deepanjan, please.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Deepanjali from NEERI, Kolkata.
Please ask your
Deepanjali
question.
from. Yeah. This has been a wonderful experience listening to the eminent panelists. Just my question is basically continuation of just what Devota sir said, that today the global problems, the complex global problems are taken as an integrated problem, and the new thinking is new stresses are on system analysis approach that considered all of the problems like growing population, clean air, water issues, and climate change, and also includes energy, food safety, and economy. Not to forget that stresses on public health.
Dr. Deepakali, you have this specific question. Otherwise, we can like this discussing.
चलो हमारे दूसरे मीटिंग है.
I think your points are very
NEERI's,
good.
so my question is, what is NEERI's take on that, and how it can be taken further by NEERI?
Policy problem, I will make a policy and circulate to all people. Thanks for that. I think we should end here because approaching lunch and then our other panelists, they also have to go. So, Dr. Kumar, please.
So, Devta sir, Dr. Devta, thank you very much for being with us today, because we always get motivation and inspiration from you. Because when I was here and when you were director, so I got so many new learnings from you, because the way you are handling all this policy and science technology that are related to science and technology, that is good. And we hope that you will be coming physically here in the next few. Sir, thank you very much. Thank you for joining. And Professor Archana, madam, thank you to you, because you accepted our invitation in very short time. So we are sorry for that. But we will look forward to have you physically also, because we have some conferences and seminars will be there on policy related issues we will organize. Similarly, thank you, sir, Dr. Vatis sir. आपका भी बहुत thanks, because you are always with us. You are very supportive of it. So thank you very much. And in the end, I will say that my audience.
I was just before the audience goes there was a kind of competition arranged in view of to celebrate World Environment Day, and that was for research students of RSH. That was a poster presentation. There were more than 20 posters which were presented on different research topics related to NEERI. And there was a jury comprising of Dr. Nandi, Dr. Shanwari madam, and Dr. Kade from Nagpur University. They have probably judged, I think Dr. Rita is listed out. So they have finalized best 2 or 3 papers. So that will be announced and prizes will be given. So I request somebody, Rima, I will do this.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. So it's time finally to give away the names of the poster winners for grant 2022. So the third prize goes to Sakina Bombay for her presentation. Antibiotic resistance and its cooperance with metal resistance in pathogen and other oxidative stress. The second prize is co-shared by Pai Singh, Lakshya Tagi, and Susain Sinha. Pai Singh presented on modified iron-based adsorbent for arsenic removal from aqueous solution.
She could answer my questions at least, all questions. I don't know about jury.
Lakshya presented the mushroom static aeration system for low feed wastewater treatment plant. And the first prize goes to Suraj Nathani for biomedication of ground crop based in anaerobic battery reactor, metagenomic and statistical analysis.
Well done. Very well done. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for your and importation theory. Next time, I would request all research students to participate in larger numbers.
Now, may I request all to stand with you will listen to national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उज्जल जगति तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
चलो बस
प्लीज बैठ जाइए।
1:30 वाजता जेवण बैठ जाइए भैया।
सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि डिग्निटरीज को पढ़ने जाने दें।